In a perfect world, our code would run correctly the first time and every time. Unfortunately, in anything but the most trivial applications, this is never the case. So we need a way to see how our code is executing, what the values of variables are through the execution of the code, what's the path of the code that's being executed. And most importantly, we need to see which errors, if any, the PHP preprocessor is throwing during the execution of the code. Now, on a development server, we would want to ensure that the display errors configuration setting in the PHP any file is set to true, and that the error reporting is set to report all errors. You can check this setting on your development server using the PHP info call. This is going to dump all of the configuration settings of the PHP preprocessor. You should never turn on the display errors, error reporting all on a production server. I think that should go without saying, but just in case, let me make that clear. That should never be the case on a production server. So some of the common errors that we're going to see in our PHP code is a missing semicolon, or a missing closing brace on a code block, or a misspelled variable name. A logic error that you might see, as we've shown as we were talking about the control structures, is using an assignment operator instead of the equals to operator. Because again, remember that assigning a value to another variable will always return true. And so your code block that you intended on running based on some condition will always run, which may obviously not be what you intended. One of my favorite ways to debug code is to scaffold the code with echo statements embedded within the key parts of the code. So I can review values of variables, I can see the flow of the code, and I can control that with an if statement using a global variable that will only trigger while I'm debugging, and then I can turn all of those statements off and have them ignored by the preprocessor when I push the code to the testing group or to production. On the other hand, there are some very good debugging tools that are available that allow you to step through your code line by line and watch the variable values as they're being assigned in the code. So let's go look at an example of scaffolding code. Okay, so I've got just a little snippet of code here. This is a demonstration of how I scaffold my applications. This is the code I use to do the scaffolding. I'll put this little snippet of code throughout the application where I need to see either where the application is in the execution, or if I need to see the value of a variable. So I start out with variable named debug, simple, and I set that variable to 1, which is equivalent to the Boolean value of true. 0 is equivalent to the Boolean value of false. So when I put that in an if statement, I say if the debug value is true, or 1, then execute this code block. And I can see the state of my program. I can see where it is in the execution. I can see what values certain variables have. Anything I'm interested in, I can spit it out here in an echo statement. And when I set this value, this debug value, to 0, then all of that code is ignored. The if statement would fail, and all of the code inside of that code block would fail. So I can easily put this throughout my program and have no impact on the user when I turn the debugging off, but when I'm trying to see the execution flow or the value of variables in the program as it's executing, I can just set the debug value to 1 and get all of the output that I need. Let's execute this, and I'll just reload this page, and we'll see that the value is printed. Now I'll reset this to 0, save, and run this page, and that block of code is completely ignored by the PHP preprocessor.